Just as Aditya thought he had uncovered all the lies, an anonymous message popped up on his phone. "You don't know the whole story yet. Meet me if you want the truth." The sender's identity shook him to his core. Aditya froze as he overheard a hushed conversation between two Phoenix Club members. The name they mentioned wasn't Riya or Vikram, it was his own. Were they plotting against him too? As Aditya cornered Vikram in the dimly lit room, his enemy smirked and said, "You think I'm the worst thing that's happened to you? Wait until you find out what Riya told me about you." Riya stood in front of Aditya, tears streaming down her face. "You think I betrayed you," she said, her voice breaking. "But you don't know what he made me do. I didn't have a choice." Aryan handed Aditya a folder filled with new evidence, his expression grim. "You can walk away now and start fresh," Aryan said. "But if you choose to open this, you'll never look at your life the same way again." Welcome to the Alibis Exposed, where trust meets betrayal in the dark. Aditya Malhotra had always believed his life was ordinary but fulfilling. He was a quiet, hard-working man who valued stability above all else. His days were spent in the sterile glow of his IT office, typing away lines of code, while his evenings were reserved for Riya, his wife of 8 years. Their life was far from glamorous, but he thought it was built on mutual respect and love. Riya, with her striking charm and magnetic personality, had always been the center of attention. Aditya often joked that she brought color to his otherwise grayscale existence. She worked as a freelance graphic designer, which allowed her the freedom to stay home while occasionally meeting clients. He admired her creativity and felt proud to be her husband. For Aditya, Riya was his anchor, his purpose. One rainy evening, Aditya came home early, a bouquet of white lilies in hand. It was their anniversary, not their wedding anniversary, but the day they had first met at their college canteen. He always marked this day, even if Riya often laughed at his sentimentality. As he stepped into their apartment, he noticed an eerie silence. The faint sound of laughter trickled in from their bedroom. Curious, Aditya quietly walked down the hallway. The door was slightly ajar. What he saw shattered him in an instant. Riya was on the bed, leaning close to Vikram Shah, his coworker, and someone he considered a friend. Their laughter wasn't innocent. The way Vikram's hand rested on Riya's shoulder and the intimate look they shared confirmed what Aditya's mind didn't want to accept. Aditya froze, his heart pounding in his chest. He wanted to scream, confront them, and demand an explanation. But he stood there, paralyzed, his grip on the bouquet tightening until the stems snapped. A sharp pain in his hand broke his trance, and he quickly left the house without being noticed. The rain poured heavily as Aditya wandered aimlessly through the streets. His mind replayed the scene over and over, like a cruel loop he couldn't escape. How long had this been going on? How could Riya, the woman he had loved and trusted, betray him like this? And Vikram? The thought of his colleague's smirking face made his blood boil. He found himself at a small tea stall. The vendor, an older man with kind eyes, offered him a cup of chai. "You look troubled, Beta," the man said gently. Aditya didn't reply but accepted the tea. The warmth of the cup in his hands brought a momentary comfort, but the storm inside him raged on. When he finally returned home, late that night, Riya was in the living room, scrolling through her phone. She looked up and smiled casually. "Where have you been? You didn't even tell me you'd be late." Aditya stared at her, searching for some sign of guilt, or remorse, but her face revealed nothing. He wanted to confront her then and there, to lay bare what he had seen, but something held him back. Instead, he muttered, "Work ran late," and walked past her into the bedroom. That night, Aditya couldn't sleep. The betrayal had opened a wound that seemed too deep to heal. He thought about their years together, the sacrifices he had made, the dreams they had shared. Was it all a lie? Was he so blind to her unhappiness that she had sought comfort elsewhere? The following days were a blur. Aditya began observing Riya more closely. He noticed the way she smiled at her phone, the long hours she spent out under, the pretense of meeting clients, and the casual indifference she showed toward him. Each detail felt like another dagger to his heart. At work, Aditya avoided Vikram. Just the sight of him made his stomach churn. Vikram, oblivious to Aditya's knowledge, continued to greet him with his usual smugness. Aditya clenched his fists, but kept his composure. He needed time to process, to plan his next move. One evening, while Riya was out, Aditya decided to look through her laptop. He hated the idea of invading her privacy, but his need for answers overpowered his guilt. What he found confirmed his suspicions. Emails and messages between Riya and Vikram painted a picture of an affair that had been going on for months. They spoke of stolen moments, secret getaways, and plans for a future together. Aditya's world crumbled. The woman he had built his life around had not only betrayed him, but was planning to leave him for another man. He felt anger, pain, and a deep sense of humiliation. But beneath it all, a new emotion began to stir. Resolve. That night, Aditya made a decision. He wouldn't let this betrayal define him. He wouldn't wallow in self-pity or let Riya and Vikram walk away unscathed. He would reclaim his dignity, his life, and his happiness. But first, he needed help. Aditya remembered a late-night conversation he had stumbled upon in an online forum months ago. It was about a group called the Phoenix Club. The group claimed to help people rise from the ashes of betrayal and rebuild their lives. At the time, he had dismissed it as one of those self-help scams, but now it felt like his only option. He spent hours researching, sifting through testimonials and reviews. The club was shrouded in mystery, with no direct contact information. Membership seemed to be by invitation only. Frustrated but determined, Aditya posted his story anonymously on a related forum, hoping someone from the club would reach out. To his surprise, he received a reply the next day. It was a cryptic message with a single line. "Pain is temporary, but ashes can build an empire." Below it was an address and a time. Aditya's curiosity was piqued. Was this a scam, or was it the lifeline he desperately needed? The next evening, Aditya stood outside a dimly lit lounge in a part of the city he rarely visited. The sign above the door simply read, "Phoenix." Taking a deep breath, he stepped inside. The air was thick with the scent of coffee and leather. A group of people sat in a corner, their voices low but intense. At the center was a man who exuded confidence and authority, Aryan Roy. Aryan looked up as Aditya entered. His piercing eyes seemed to read every emotion on Aditya's face. "Welcome," Aryan said with a slight nod. "You've been hurt, but pain is just the beginning." Aditya felt a flicker of hope for the first time in weeks. He didn't know what lay ahead, but he knew one thing. He wasn't going to let Riya and Vikram win. The Phoenix Club was his chance to rise again, and he was ready to take it. Aditya returned home after his first meeting with the Phoenix Club, his thoughts racing. Aryan Roy's words still echoed in his ears. Pain can either destroy you or shape you into something greater. The choice is yours. Aditya knew he had to make a choice. He could either remain a broken man or rebuild his life stronger than ever. The next few days were spent preparing himself mentally for what lay ahead. The Phoenix Club had a strict process, and Aryan had warned him. This is not just about revenge, it's about reclaiming your life. Are you ready? Aditya had nodded, but deep down he wondered if he truly was. The first step was to confront the truth head-on. Aryan encouraged him to sit with his feelings and acknowledge the pain, anger, and betrayal he felt. Avoiding these emotions would only make him weaker. Aditya spent hours in his room, reliving the moments of his marriage, from the happiest memories to the darkest ones. It was excruciating, but he knew it was necessary. Riya, meanwhile, continued her charade. She behaved as though everything was normal, unaware of Aditya's knowledge of her betrayal. Aditya found it difficult to be in the same room with her. Every smile she gave him, every casual conversation, felt like an insult, but he kept his composure. The Phoenix Club had advised him to remain calm and not act impulsively. One evening, Aryan invited Aditya to a private session with a few core members of the club. They met at the same lounge where he'd first found the group. This time, Aryan introduced him to the others. Meera Singh, a strong and empathetic woman who had faced her own betrayal. Karan Patel, the sharp-minded strategist. Kavya Rao, the fearless avenger. And Maya D'Souza, the club's emotional anchor. Each of them shared their stories of heartbreak and betrayal, stories that mirrored Aditya's in different ways. "We've all been where you are now," Meera said, her voice kind but firm. "The pain feels unbearable, but trust me, it's temporary. What matters is what you do next." Karan leaned forward, his eyes gleaming with determination. "We'll help you, but remember, this isn't just about taking revenge. It's about rebuilding your confidence, your dignity, and your life," Aditya nodded. For the first time in weeks, he felt like he wasn't alone. The club devised a plan for Aditya, starting with small but significant steps to regain control over his life. Kavya suggested that Aditya take up self-defense classes. "It's not just about learning to fight," she explained. "It's about feeling strong again, both physically and mentally." Aditya hesitated at first, but after his first session he realized how empowering it felt. The repetitive movements, the focus, the adrenaline, it all gave him a sense of purpose. Meanwhile, Karan guided Aditya through a financial overhaul. "You need to secure your assets," Karan said. "Riya might not know this yet, but if she's planning to leave, she'll go after what's yours. We'll make sure she doesn't succeed." Under Karan's guidance, Aditya began transferring his savings to a separate account and documenting all shared expenses. It was a tedious process, but it gave him a sense of control. The next step was to gather undeniable proof of Riya and Vikram's affair. Aryan emphasized the importance of remaining discreet. "Confronting her without evidence will only backfire," he warned. With Karan's help, Aditya set up a hidden camera in their living room and installed tracking software on Riya's laptop. It felt invasive, but Aditya reminded himself that he deserved the truth. Within days, the evidence began piling up. Messages, photos, and call logs painted a clear picture of Riya's infidelity. Each discovery was like a fresh wound, but it also fueled his resolve. Maya became Aditya's confidant during this time. She encouraged him to talk openly about his feelings and provided a safe space for him to vent. "You can't carry this burden alone," she said gently. "Letting it out doesn't make you weak." Aditya also grew closer to Mira, who shared her own story of betrayal. Her resilience inspired him, and he found himself admiring her strength. She had rebuilt her life after losing everything, and Aditya began to believe he could do the same. One night, while reviewing the evidence, Aditya discovered something that changed everything. Riya and Vikram had been planning a trip together, a weekend getaway at a luxury resort. The dates coincided with a business trip Aditya had mentioned weeks ago. They had planned this betrayal right under his nose. Aditya's hands trembled as he read their messages. The betrayal cut deeper than ever, but it also presented an opportunity. He shared the information with the Phoenix Club, and they immediately began brainstorming. "This is your chance to turn the tables," Aryan said, his eyes gleaming with determination. "We'll make sure they regret underestimating you." Karan outlined a plan that was both meticulous and ruthless. "We'll expose them," he said, "but not before we make them realize the gravity of their actions." Aditya felt a mix of fear and anticipation. The old him would have hesitated, but the new Aditya, the one shaped by the Phoenix Club, was ready. He had spent weeks preparing, and now it was time to act. As the weekend approached, Aditya informed Riya that his business trip had been cancelled. Her face faltered for a moment, but she quickly recovered. "Oh, that's great," she said with a forced smile. "We can spend some time together then." Aditya played along, pretending to believe her. Inside, he was already envisioning the moment when the truth would finally come out. The Phoenix Club had orchestrated every detail, ensuring that Riya and Vikram's betrayal would be exposed in the most undeniable way. The day before their planned getaway, Aditya packed his bag as though preparing for his usual work trip. Riya watched him, her demeanor calm and collected, but Aditya noticed the subtle tension in her movements, the way she avoided meeting his eyes, the nervous tapping of her fingers. She was lying, and she knew it. As Aditya walked out the door, he turned back to look at her. "Take care, Riya," he said, his voice steady. "I'll see you soon." Riya smiled, but Aditya could see the cracks forming in her facade. He stepped into the elevator, his heart pounding. This was it. The first step toward reclaiming his life. The weekend arrived, and Aditya found himself pacing nervously in Aryan's apartment. The plan had been set in motion, but he couldn't help the knot of anxiety in his stomach. Aryan placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "Trust the process," he said. "We've done this before and it always works. Stay strong." Aditya nodded, taking a deep breath. Over the past weeks, he had transformed into someone he barely recognized. Gone was the passive man who allowed life to happen to him. In his place stood someone ready to fight for his dignity. Riya and Vikram arrived at the luxury resort as planned, their faces alight with excitement. They checked into their suite, oblivious to the fact that their every move was being monitored. Unbeknownst to them, the Phoenix Club had arranged for a private investigator to tail them. Hidden cameras and microphones had been strategically placed in their room, capturing every incriminating moment. Back in the city, Aditya and the core, members of the Phoenix Club, gathered in Aryan's living room, watching the live feed on a large screen. Each laugh, each touch, each whispered word between Riya and Vikram was a dagger to Aditya's heart, but he forced himself to watch. This was the proof he needed to take control of his life. "They're so smug," Kavya muttered, her jaw tight. They think they've gotten away with it. Not for long, Karan replied, his voice cold and calculated. We'll make sure of that. The next phase of the plan involved a carefully orchestrated confrontation. The Phoenix Club had booked the resort's private dining hall under the guise of hosting a corporate event. Invitations had been sent to key individuals in Riya and Vikram's lives, their colleagues, mutual friends, and even Riya's parents. The stage was set for a dramatic unveiling. On the second evening of Riya and Vikram's stay, Aditya arrived at the resort, flanked by Aryan and Kavya. His heart pounded as they walked into the dining hall, where the invited guests were already mingling. The room buzzed with anticipation. No one knew the true purpose of the gathering. "Are you ready?" Aryan asked quietly. Aditya nodded, his expression resolute. "Let's do this." At exactly 8 p.m. the doors to the dining hall were closed and the lights dimmed. A projector screen lit up at the front of the room, displaying a slideshow of happy moments from Aditya and Riya's marriage. The guests smiled and clapped, assuming it was a romantic gesture. But as the slideshow progressed, the tone shifted. Images of Riya and Vikram together began to appear, holding hands, sharing intimate moments, and laughing in ways that betrayed their affair. Gasps filled the room as the evidence became undeniable. The final slide was a live feed from the hidden, cameras in their suite showing Riya and Vikram sitting on the bed, laughing and clinking champagne glasses. Aditya stepped forward, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining me tonight. I'm sorry you had to see this, but it's time for the truth to come out." The room fell silent as Aditya recounted his story. He spoke of his love for Riya, his sacrifices, and the betrayal that had shattered his trust. He kept his tone measured, refusing to stoop to anger or bitterness. By the time he finished, many in the room were visibly moved. Riya and Vikram were summoned to the dining hall under the pretense of a guest complaint. They walked in, unaware of what awaited them. When they saw the room filled with familiar faces and the incriminating slideshow on the screen, their expressions shifted from confusion to horror. "Aditya, what is this?" Riya stammered, her face pale. Aditya looked at her calmly. "This is the truth, Riya, the truth you've been hiding from everyone." Vikram tried to intervene, his tone defensive. "This is ridiculous. You've invaded our privacy." Kavya cut him off, stepping forward with a smirk. "Privacy? Funny, considering how little respect you've shown for boundaries." The guests began murmuring, their judgmental stares piercing through Riya and Vikram. Riya's parents looked devastated, while her friends exchanged shocked glances. Vikram's colleagues whispered among themselves, their disdain evident. Aditya took a deep breath and addressed the room. "I didn't do this to humiliate anyone. I did this to reclaim my life and my dignity. Betrayal has consequences, and it's time they face them." Riya tried to approach him, tears streaming down her face. "Aditya, please, I made a mistake, but we can fix this. Don't throw everything away." Aditya stepped back, his expression resolute. "You already threw it away, Riya. This is your mess to clean up now." As the night progressed, Riya and Vikram's lives began to unravel. Their reputations were shattered, and the trust they had taken for granted was gone. Aditya, on the other hand, felt a sense of closure he hadn't thought possible. Back at Aryan's apartment, the Phoenix Club members gathered to celebrate. Meera handed Aditya a glass of wine, her smile warm. "You did it," she said. "You took the first step toward reclaiming your life." Aditya nodded, a small smile playing on his lips. "I couldn't have done it without all of you. Thank you." Aryan raised his glass in a toast. To Aditya. May this be the beginning of a new chapter. As the group clinked glasses, Aditya felt a sense of belonging he hadn't experienced in years. For the first time since his world had fallen apart, he allowed himself to hope for a brighter future. Aditya sat in his car outside the luxury resort where Riya and Vikram were meeting. His heart raced as he thought about the plan. Everything had to go perfectly. This wasn't just about revenge anymore, it was about taking control of his life. The Phoenix Club had helped him get here, and now it was time to act. The plan was straightforward but precise. Karan and Kavya had helped Aditya arrange everything. A private investigator hired through the club's connections had already confirmed Riya and Vikram's reservation. Their room number, itinerary, and even the restaurant they planned to visit had been tracked. Aditya's role was to confront them at the perfect moment, ensuring their betrayal was exposed beyond denial. Aditya stepped out of the car, adjusting his jacket. He carried a small camera in his pocket, set to record everything. The idea of confronting them filled him with both dread and determination. The Phoenix Club's mantra echoed in his mind, "Take back your power." Inside the resort, the ambiance was opulent. Couples laughed over glasses of wine, and the faint sound of a piano filled the air. Aditya felt out of place, but he pushed through the unease. He spotted Vikram at the bar. First, he was alone, sipping a drink, looking as confident and smug as ever. Aditya's fists clenched, but he took a deep breath. Patience was key. He moved toward the reception desk, pretending to be a guest. The receptionist greeted him with a warm smile. "Good evening, sir. How can I help you?" "I'm here to surprise my wife," Aditya said, forcing a smile. "She's staying here, but I'd like to keep it a secret for now. Can you tell me which room Riya Kapoor is in?" The receptionist hesitated. "I'm sorry, sir. We can't disclose guest information." Aditya leaned closer, lowering his voice. "I understand, but it's our anniversary, and I've planned something special. Please, it'll mean so much to her." The receptionist smiled sympathetically. "Room 302, enjoy your evening, sir." Aditya's heart pounded as he walked toward the elevator. He'd rehearsed this moment in his mind countless times, but now that it was happening, every step felt heavier than the last. When he reached room 302, Aditya hesitated outside the door. He could hear muffled laughter inside. Riya's voice was unmistakable. His chest tightened as anger and heartbreak surged through him. He knocked firmly. The laughter stopped. After a moment, the door opened slightly and Riya's face appeared. Her expression shifted from surprise to panic. "Aditya, what are you doing here?" Aditya pushed the door open, stepping inside. The room was luxurious, with champagne glasses on the table and rose petals scattered across the bed. Vikram stood by the window, his confident demeanor faltering. As he recognized Aditya, "What's going on here?" Aditya's voice was steady, but his eyes burned with fury. Riya stammered, It's not what it looks like." "Save it," Aditya snapped, pulling out his camera and pressing record. "You've lied to me for months. Now the truth is coming out." Vikram stepped forward, trying to regain his composure. "Look, Aditya, there's no need for this. Let's talk like adults." Aditya's laughter was bitter. "Like adults? You're sleeping with my wife and you want to talk like adults?" Riya's face turned pale. "Aditya, please, let's go home and talk." "This doesn't have to get ugly," Aditya pointed at her. "You made it ugly the moment you decided to betray me. All I ever did was love you, Riya. I gave you everything, and this is how you repay me." Tears filled Riya's eyes, but Aditya didn't waver. He turned to Vikram. "And you? You think you're so clever, don't you? Taking what isn't yours? Let me tell you something. You're nothing but a coward." Vikram's jaw tightened, but he didn't respond. The tension in the room was palpable. Aditya pulled out his phone and sent the recorded footage to Aryan, who had been waiting for an update. Within minutes, Aryan's team had started uploading the video to a private link, ready to be shared if necessary. The Phoenix Club's network ensured that the footage would be seen by those who mattered most to Riya and Vikram, their families, friends, and colleagues. Riya's phone buzzed on the table. She picked it up, her face contorting in horror as she saw the messages flooding in. "Aditya, what have you done?" "What needed to be done," Aditya replied coldly. "You wanted to keep this a secret? Well, now everyone knows the truth." Riya broke down, sobbing uncontrollably. Vikram tried to leave, but Aditya blocked his path. "You're not going anywhere," he said. "You'll face the consequences of your actions." "What do you want from me?" Vikram asked, his voice shaking. Aditya leaned closer, his voice low and menacing. "I want you to remember this moment. Remember what it feels like to have your life fall apart, because that's exactly what you deserve." Aditya walked out of the room, leaving Riya and Vikram to deal with the fallout. He felt a strange mix of emotions: anger, sadness, and a small sense of relief. The confrontation had been painful, but it had also been liberating. For the first time in months, he felt like he could breathe again. Outside the resort, Aryan was waiting in his car. Aditya got in, and they drove off in silence. After a while, Aryan spoke. "You did well." Facing them took courage. Aditya nodded, staring out the window. "It's not over yet, though. There's still a long way to go." "True," Aryan said. "But you've taken the first step, and that's the hardest part." As they drove back to the city, Aditya thought about the Phoenix Club and the people who had supported him. He realized that while the betrayal had broken him, it had also given him a chance to rebuild himself. And this time, he would make sure he was stronger than ever. Aditya's return from the resort marked the beginning of a new chapter. The confrontation had been a pivotal moment, but it wasn't the end of the road. The Phoenix Club had taught him that exposing betrayal was only part of the process. Now, he needed to regain control over his life and face the fallout. Riya's reaction to the confrontation had been predictable. She tried to justify her actions, blaming Aditya for being emotionally unavailable. "You were always so focused on work," she had said, tears streaming down her face. "I felt so alone." Aditya's silence in response was deafening. He had no interest in her excuses. The betrayal wasn't just about the affair. It was about the trust she had shattered. The days that followed were tense. Riya's attempts to reach out to Aditya were met with cold indifference. She tried to cook his favorite meals, leave apologetic notes, and even suggest couples therapy. But Aditya remained unmoved. He had made up his mind to end the marriage, but he wasn't going to rush the process. The Phoenix Club's advice was clear: act strategically, not impulsively. Karan stepped in to help Aditya with the legal aspects of the divorce. "We need to make sure she doesn't get more than she deserves," Karan said. "And trust me, the evidence you have will be a game-changer in court." Aditya handed over the recordings, text messages, and photographs he had gathered. Karan reviewed them with a critical eye. "This is solid," he said. "We'll use this to negotiate a favorable settlement. But remember, this process will test your patience." Aditya nodded. He was prepared for the challenges ahead. The betrayal had hurt him deeply, but it had also awakened a resilience he didn't know he possessed. As the weeks passed, Riya's life began to unravel. Vikram, who had been her partner in betrayal, had disappeared from her life after the resort incident. His charm had evaporated the moment things got difficult. Riya's attempts to contact him were met with silence. She was left alone to face the consequences of her actions. At work, rumors of the affair had started to circulate. While Aditya had kept the details private, the confrontation at the resort had been witnessed by enough people to spark speculation. Riya found herself increasingly isolated, her colleagues' whispers and judgmental glances making her workdays unbearable. One evening, Riya approached Aditya as he sat in the living room, reading. "Aditya, please," she said, her voice trembling. "I know I made a mistake, but can't we try to fix this? We've been together for so many years. Doesn't that mean anything to you?" Aditya looked up from his book, his expression unreadable. "It did," he said quietly, "until you decided it didn't." His words hung in the air, heavy with finality. Riya's shoulders slumped, and she walked away, her eyes brimming with tears. Amid the chaos, Aditya found solace in the Phoenix Club. The members became his second family, offering support and guidance as he navigated the complexities of his situation. Mira, in particular, became a close confidant. Their conversations often extended late into the night, and Aditya found himself drawn to her warmth and understanding. "You're stronger than you realize," Mira told him one evening as they shared a cup of coffee. "This experience doesn't define you, it's just a chapter in your story," Aditya smiled. "I'm starting to believe that," he said. With the club's encouragement, Aditya began to focus on himself. He resumed his self-defense classes with Kavya, who pushed him to his limits. "You're not just fighting for yourself," she said during one grueling session. "You're fighting for the life you deserve." When the divorce papers were finally served, Riya's reaction was a mix of shock and anger. "So that's it?" she demanded. "You're just going to throw away everything we've built together?" Aditya remained calm. "You threw it away the moment you chose to betray me," he said. "The proceedings were contentious. Riya's lawyer tried to paint her as a victim, but the evidence Aditya had gathered was damning. Karan's legal expertise proved invaluable, and Aditya emerged from the process with his assets intact. The settlement was fair but left no room for Riya to exploit his kindness. The final hearing marked the end of their marriage. As Aditya walked out of the courtroom, he felt a weight lift off his shoulders. He was free from the lies, the pain, and the betrayal. In the weeks following the divorce, Riya tried to make amends. She sent Aditya lengthy messages, apologizing for her actions and expressing regret. But Aditya didn't respond. He had no interest in reopening old wounds. His focus was on moving forward. Riya's attempts to rebuild her life were met with limited success. Her reputation had been tarnished, and she struggled to regain the trust of those around her. She often thought about Aditya and the life they had shared, but she knew she had no one to blame but herself. For Aditya, life began to take on new meaning. He dedicated himself to his work, his newfound hobbies, and his friendships. The bond he shared with Mira grew stronger, and he found himself looking forward to their conversations and shared moments. One evening, as they walked through a park, Mira turned to him and said, "You've come so far, Aditya. I'm proud of you." Aditya smiled. "I couldn't have done it without you and the club," he said. "You all gave me the strength to fight back and the courage to move on." Mira hesitated for a moment, before reaching out to hold his hand. "Maybe it's time for a new beginning," she said softly. Aditya looked at her, a sense of warmth and hope spreading through him. For the first time in a long while, he felt ready to embrace the possibilities of the future. Riya's life began to unravel the moment Aditya left the house. She had been so sure of her plan, so confident that she could keep her double life hidden. But the strange tension in Aditya's voice when he said goodbye made her uneasy. Still, she brushed it off, focusing instead on the weekend getaway she had planned with Vikram. It was supposed to be their perfect escape, a chance to revel in their relationship without any interruptions. The next morning, Riya packed her bags and sent a quick message to Vikram, letting him know she was on her way. She told Aditya she had plans with some friends, a lie she delivered with practiced ease. Vikram, as always, was waiting with his charming smile and effortless confidence. "You look stunning," he said, as she stepped into his car. "This weekend is going to be unforgettable." But Riya couldn't shake the nagging feeling in her chest. Something about Aditya's demeanor the previous night had felt off. She dismissed it, reminding herself that he was completely oblivious. Or so she thought as Riya and Vikram drove. To the resort, Aditya and the Phoenix Club were already in motion. Karan had meticulously coordinated the next phase of their plan. They had hired private investigators to shadow Riya and Vikram, ensuring they had real-time updates on their movements. Aditya, with Aryan by his side, waited in a nearby hotel room, monitoring the situation. "How are you feeling?" Aryan asked, noticing the tension in Aditya's expression. "Angry, nervous, but mostly I just want this to end," Aditya admitted. "I've spent too long living in denial. It's time she faces the consequences." Aryan nodded. "Remember, this isn't just about exposing her. It's about reclaiming your life. You've come so far already. Don't lose sight of your goals." Aditya took a deep breath, grounding himself. He couldn't afford to let his emotions cloud his judgment now. At the resort, Riya and Vikram checked into a lavish suite. The private investigators captured every moment, from their affectionate gestures to their whispered conversations. The evidence was damning, and it was only a matter of time before it would all come to light. Riya tried to relax, but her unease grew with each passing hour. She couldn't explain it, but something felt wrong. Vikram, oblivious to her inner turmoil, poured them glasses of wine and toasted to their future. "You worry too much," he said with a grin. "Aditya's a fool. He'll never suspect a thing." Riya forced a smile, but her thoughts were elsewhere. What if Aditya wasn't as clueless as she believed? What if he knew? Back at the hotel, Aditya received a call from the investigators. "They're settled in," one of them reported. "We've got everything we need." Aditya's heart raced. This was the moment he had been waiting for. With Aryan's guidance, he had arranged for Riya and Vikram's actions to be exposed in the most impactful way possible. The Phoenix Club had rented out a conference hall at the resort under the guise of hosting a corporate event. Invitations had been sent to key individuals in Riya and Vikram's lives, including mutual friends and colleagues. The stage was set for the truth to come out. On the evening of the event, Riya and Vikram were lounging by the pool when they received an invitation to the conference. Riya frowned, puzzled. "What's this about?" she asked. "Probably just some boring corporate thing," Vikram replied. "Ignore it." But Riya's curiosity got the better of her. "Let's just check it out. It could be interesting." Reluctantly, Vikram agreed. They changed into more formal attire and headed to the conference hall. The moment they stepped inside, Ria's blood ran cold. The room was filled with familiar faces, friends, colleagues, and even a few family members. At the front of the room stood Aditya, calm and composed, with Aryan by his side. A large screen displayed a paused video, the opening frame unmistakably showing Riya and Vikram in an intimate moment. Riya froze, her mind racing. How had this happened? How much did Aditya know? "Thank you all for coming," Aditya began, his voice steady. "I apologize for the unconventional nature of this gathering, but there are some truths that need to be addressed." He turned to Riya and Vikram, his eyes cold. "You two have been lying to everyone here. You've betrayed not only me, but also the trust of every person who cares about you." Vikram tried to speak, but Aditya held up a hand, silencing him. "Don't. You've already said enough." With a nod to Aryan, Aditya signaled for the video to play. The footage left no room for doubt. Gasps and murmurs filled the room as the extent of Riya and Vikram's betrayal became clear. Riya felt her world collapse around her. She had been so confident, so sure she could keep her secrets hidden. But now, everything was out in the open. As the video ended, Aditya addressed the room. "I've spent years sacrificing for someone who didn't value me, but today I'm reclaiming my life. This is not about revenge, it's about truth, accountability, and moving forward." He turned to Riya one last time. "I trusted you, I loved you, but I deserve better than lies and betrayal. This is the end of us." With that, he walked out of the room, leaving Riya and Vikram to face the fallout of their actions. The guests began to disperse, some offering words of support to Aditya, others expressing their disappointment in Riya and Vikram. Later that night, Aditya sat with the Phoenix Club, reflecting on the events of the day. "It's over," he said quietly. "I've closed that chapter of my life." "And now you can start writing a new one," Mira said, her voice filled with encouragement. "You've come so far, Aditya. Don't stop now." Aditya nodded, a small smile forming on his lips. For the first time in months, he felt a sense of peace. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but he was ready to face it with the support of his new friends and the strength he had found within himself. Aditya's hands gripped the steering wheel tightly as he drove back home from the meeting with Aryan and the Phoenix Club. The plans were in motion, and the pieces of the puzzle were starting to fit together. The betrayal of Riya and Vikram still stung, but Aditya had transformed that pain into focus. This wasn't just about revenge anymore, it was about reclaiming his life and dignity. He pulled into the driveway and saw Riya's car parked neatly, as if nothing had changed. The house, which had once been a symbol of their dreams together, now felt like a hollow shell. Aditya's jaw tightened as he walked to the door. He pushed it open and stepped inside. "You're home early," Riya said from the living room. She was curled up on the couch, scrolling through her phone. She looked up briefly and offered him a smile, one that used to make his heart flutter but now filled him with bitterness. "Work wrapped up early," Aditya replied casually, masking his emotions. He had become a master of concealing his feelings over the past few weeks. The Phoenix Club had taught him the value of patience and strategy. "That's nice," Riya said, returning her attention to her phone. Aditya went to the kitchen, poured himself a glass of water, and leaned against the counter. He observed her from a distance, noting the way she seemed so at ease. She had no idea that he knew about her affair with Vikram. It amazed him how effortlessly she played her part. Later that evening, Aditya received a message from Karan. "Isti, Evidence has surfaced. Aryan will brief you tomorrow. Be ready." The message piqued Aditya's curiosity. The Phoenix Club had been gathering intelligence on Vikram, and every new piece of information brought them closer to their goal. Aditya replied with a simple acknowledgement and deleted the message immediately. The next day, Aditya met Aryan and Karan at a private location. Aryan's expression was serious as he handed Aditya a folder. Inside were documents, photographs, and financial records that painted a damning picture of Vikram. "Vikram has been embezzling funds from his company," Aryan said. "He's been using shell accounts to siphon money. We've traced some of these transactions, and it's clear that he's been funding his lavish lifestyle with stolen money." Aditya's eyes narrowed as he flipped through the pages. "Does his company know?"
"Not yet," Karan said. "But we have everything we need to blow this wide open. If we expose this, Vikram's career and reputation will be destroyed." Aditya felt a surge of satisfaction. It wasn't just about exposing the affair anymore.
Vikram's betrayal went beyond personal boundaries. He was a fraud in every sense of the word. "What about Riya?" Aditya asked, his voice cold. "She'll face the consequences of her choices," Aryan said. "But remember, this isn't just about them. It's about you finding closure and moving forward." Aditya nodded, his resolve strengthening. As the days passed, Aditya's interactions with Riya grew more calculated. He remained polite but distant, carefully observing her behavior. Riya, oblivious to his knowledge, continued her routine. She even suggested they go out for dinner one evening, trying to maintain the illusion of a happy marriage. At dinner, Aditya played along, asking her about her day and pretending to be interested in her stories, but his mind was elsewhere, already, planning the next steps. He noticed the way she avoided talking about Vikram, carefully steering conversations away from anything that might raise suspicion. "You've been working so hard lately," Riya said, placing her hand on his. "Maybe we should plan a vacation, just the two of us. It'll be good for us." Aditya forced a smile. "That sounds nice. Let's talk about it soon." The irony of her suggestion wasn't lost on him. She wanted to escape with him while secretly planning her own escapades with Vikram. Aditya's patience was being tested, but he reminded himself that the endgame was near. With the evidence against Vikram ready, Aryan and the Phoenix Club began setting the stage for the final act. They planned to expose Vikram's crimes publicly, ensuring maximum impact. Aditya would play a key role in this, confronting Riya and Vikram at the right moment. "Timing is everything," Aryan reminded him. "When the truth comes out, they need to be completely blindsided. There's no room for error." Aditya spent his evenings reviewing the plan with the club. Each detail was meticulously crafted, from the timing of the exposé to the public fallout that would follow. The club had connections in the media and legal circles, ensuring that Vikram's actions would not go unnoticed. Meanwhile, Aditya continued, gathering evidence against Riya. He recorded their conversations, saved her messages, and documented every instance of her deceit. It wasn't just about proving her infidelity, it was about protecting himself legally if she decided to retaliate. On the surface, everything appeared normal. Aditya and Riya went about their daily lives, exchanging pleasantries and pretending to be a happy couple. But beneath the surface, tensions were building. Aditya's nights were restless, filled with thoughts of the impending confrontation. One evening, Meera called him. "How are you holding up?" she asked, her voice gentle. "I'm managing," Aditya replied. "It's not easy, but I know I have to see this through." "You're stronger than you think," Meera said. "Remember, this isn't just about them. It's about you taking back control of your life." Her words gave Aditya a sense of reassurance. The Phoenix Club had become more than just a support group. They were his allies, his family. As the day of the exposé approached, Aditya found himself oscillating between anxiety and determination. He knew that once the truth came out, there would be no turning back. But he also knew that it was necessary. The night before the planned confrontation, Aditya stood in front of the mirror, staring at his reflection. He barely recognized the man he saw. The timid, uncertain Aditya was gone, replaced by someone stronger, someone who had faced his fears and refused to be broken. He took a deep breath and clenched his fists. "This ends tomorrow," he whispered. To himself, Aditya knew that the storm was coming, but he was ready to face it head on. For the first time in weeks, he felt a sense of clarity. He wasn't just fighting for revenge, he was fighting for himself. Aditya stepped out of the car, his face calm but his mind racing. Tonight was the night everything would come to light. The Phoenix Club had orchestrated every detail of the evening, ensuring that Riya and Vikram would have no escape from the truth. The venue was a private banquet hall, elegantly decorated for what Riya believed was a corporate anniversary event for Aditya's company. Invitations had been sent to friends, family, and colleagues under the guise of celebrating a professional milestone. Unbeknownst to her, it was all part of the Phoenix Club's plan to expose her betrayal in front of everyone who mattered to her. Aditya entered the hall and took a deep breath. Aryan, Meera, Karan, Kavya, and Maya were already there, stationed strategically around the room. Each had their role to play in the night's events. Riya arrived shortly after, looking radiant in a red gown. Her confidence was palpable, as if she had no idea the storm that was about to hit. Vikram walked in a few minutes later, his demeanor smug and self-assured. The sight of him made Aditya's blood boil, but he kept his emotions in check. This wasn't the time for impulsiveness. The evening began with casual mingling. Aditya moved through the crowd, greeting guests and engaging in polite conversations. He could feel Riya's eyes
on him, but he avoided her, knowing she'd eventually come to him.
Vikram, on the other hand, stayed in the background, clearly trying to avoid drawing attention to himself. As the evening progressed, Aryan took the stage to address the guests. He welcomed everyone warmly and spoke about the importance of trust, loyalty, and perseverance in both personal and professional relationships. His words carried a double meaning that only a select few in the room understood. "We're here tonight to celebrate achievements, but also to reflect on the values that truly matter," Aryan said, his voice steady and commanding. "Sometimes the most valuable lessons come from the most painful experiences, and sometimes those experiences reveal who we truly are." Aditya's heart pounded as Aryan handed the microphone to him. This was the moment he'd been preparing for. "Good evening, everyone," Aditya began, his voice calm but firm. "I want to thank you all for being here tonight. This event isn't just about my professional journey. It's about acknowledging the people who've been a part of my life, for better or worse." He glanced at Riya, who smiled back at him, oblivious to what was coming. Vikram shifted uncomfortably, sensing that something was off. Aditya continued, "Over the years, I've learned that trust is the foundation of every relationship. And when that trust is broken, it changes everything." He signaled to Karan, who dimmed the lights and activated the projector. A series of photos and messages appeared on the screen, evidence of Riya and Vikram's affair. Gasps filled the room as the guests realized what they were seeing. Riya's face turned pale, and Vikram's smug expression disappeared in an instant. "Aditya, what is this?" Riya stammered, her voice shaking. "This," Aditya said, his voice steady, "is the truth. The truth you've been hiding from me, from everyone. And now everyone knows." Riya tried to deny it, but the evidence was undeniable. Friends and family members began whispering among themselves, their expressions a mix of shock and disappointment. "Aditya, please," Riya pleaded, tears streaming down her face. "Let's talk about this in private." "Why should I?" Aditya shot back, his voice cold. "You didn't think about privacy when you were betraying me. You made a mockery of our marriage, and now you're facing the consequences." Vikram attempted to leave the hall, but Kavya intercepted him. "Not so fast," she said, her tone icy. "You're as much a part of this as she is. You don't get to run away." Aryan stepped forward, addressing the room. "Betrayal is a painful thing, but it's also a lesson. Tonight, we've seen the consequences of dishonesty and selfishness. Let this serve as a reminder to value the people who truly matter in your lives." As the event came to an end, the guests began to leave, their faces somber. Riya and Vikram were left standing in the middle of the hall, their reputations in ruins. Aditya, meanwhile, felt a sense of closure he hadn't thought possible. "Are you okay?" Meera asked, placing a comforting hand on his shoulder. Aditya nodded. "I will be. Thanks to all of you." Aryan approached him, a proud smile on his face. "You did well tonight. This is the beginning of a new chapter for you." Aditya looked around the room, taking in the faces of the people who had supported him through his darkest moments. For the first time in months, he felt hopeful about the future. As he walked out of the hall, he knew he still had a long way to go, but he also knew he wasn't alone. With the Phoenix Club by his side, he was ready to face whatever came next. Aditya's apartment felt colder than usual as he sat alone, reflecting on everything that had unfolded. The events of the last week replayed in his mind like a film. Riya's exposed betrayal, Vikram's arrogance crumbling in the face of public humiliation, and the momentary satisfaction he had felt as justice played out before his eyes. But now, as silence filled the room, Aditya felt the weight of loneliness pressing down on him. Maya's voice echoed in his thoughts. "Sometimes, after we've confronted our pain, the emptiness feels worse. But it's in this emptiness that we rebuild." He had heard those words during one of their Phoenix Club meetings, but at the time he hadn't understood their full meaning. Now he did. Aditya's phone buzzed, breaking his reverie. It was a message from Meera. "Hey, just checking in. How are you holding up?" Aditya stared at the screen for a moment before typing back, "I'm okay, just trying to figure out what comes next." Almost instantly, she replied, "You're stronger than you think, Aditya. Don't forget that." Her words brought a small smile to his face. Meera had been a rock for him throughout this ordeal, and their growing friendship had become one of the few bright spots in his life. He decided to call her instead of texting back. "Hey," Meera's warm voice greeted him. "How are you really doing?" Aditya hesitated. "Honestly, I feel lost. The revenge felt good in the moment, but now I don't know where to go from here." Meera's tone softened. "That's normal. Closure isn't the end of the journey. It's just a step. You've spent so much time focusing on Riya and Vikram. Maybe now it's time to focus on yourself." Aditya nodded, even though she couldn't see him. Easier said than done. Start small, she suggested. What's something you've always wanted to do but never had the chance? The question caught him off guard. He hadn't thought about his own dreams or desires in years. His life had revolved around work and his marriage, leaving little room for anything else. But as he pondered Mira's question, a memory surfaced, his love for painting. Before life had gotten so complicated, he used to lose himself in colours and canvases. It had been years since he'd picked up a brush. "I used to paint," he said finally. "But I stopped a long time ago." "Then start again," Mira encouraged. "Even if it's just for yourself. You deserve to reconnect with the things that make you happy." Aditya felt a flicker of hope. Maybe it was time to rediscover the parts of himself he had buried. Meanwhile, Riya's world was unraveling. After the explosive confrontation, she had expected anger from Aditya, but not the cold indifference that followed. He had left the house without a word, and his absence was a constant reminder of her mistakes. Vikram had been no help either. His charm had vanished the moment the scandal broke, leaving her to deal with the fallout alone. Riya sat in their living room, scrolling through her phone. Her social media accounts were flooded with comments, some sympathetic, but most condemning. The humiliation was unbearable. She had reached out to Vikram hoping for some reassurance, but he had blocked her on every platform. "Coward," she muttered bitterly. As the days passed, Riya found herself consumed by regret. She replayed her choices over and over, wondering how she had let things get so out of control. The life she had taken for granted was gone, and she had no one to blame but herself. Desperate for closure, Riya decided to call Aditya. She rehearsed what she would say, trying to find the right words to express her remorse. When she finally dialed his number, her hands trembled. Aditya answered after a few rings. "Hello?" His voice was calm but distant. "Aditya," Riya began, her voice shaky. I just wanted to say I'm sorry for everything." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. When Aditya finally spoke, his tone was measured. "I've already moved on, Riya. You should do the same." His words hit her like a punch to the gut.
"I know I hurt you," she said, tears streaming down her face. "But can't we at least talk? Maybe we can—" "No," Aditya interrupted firmly. "We're done, Riya. Whatever we had, it's over." Before she could respond, he ended
the call. Riya stared at her phone, the reality of her situation sinking in. Aditya wasn't coming back. She was truly alone. Aditya felt a sense of relief after the call with Riya. For the first time, he had taken control of the narrative. He wasn't the victim anymore. He was the one setting boundaries, deciding what he wanted and what he didn't. That evening, he pulled out an old canvas and a set of paints he had stored away in the closet. The supplies were dusty, but they still felt familiar in his hands. As he began to paint, the world around him faded away. Each stroke of the brush felt therapeutic, a release of all the emotions he had been holding inside. Hours passed without him realizing it. When he finally stepped back to look at his work, he felt a sense of accomplishment. The painting wasn't perfect, but it was his. For the first time in a long while, he felt proud of himself. The next day, Aditya brought the painting to the Phoenix Club meeting. The group had become like a second family to him, and he wanted to share this small victory with them. "It's amazing," Mira said, admiring the painting. "You've got real talent, Aditya," Karan clapped him on the back. "I'd buy that for my office, seriously." Aryan smiled, his approval evident. "This is what I meant when I said you could shape your pain into something greater. You've taken the first step toward rebuilding your life." Aditya felt a surge of gratitude for the people who had stood by him. He wasn't the same man he had been a few months ago. He was stronger, more confident, and ready to face whatever came next. Aditya stood on the balcony of his apartment, the city lights stretching out before him like a sea of stars. It had been a long journey to reach this point, one filled with heartbreak, betrayal, and ultimately self-discovery. The past few months had tested every part of his being, but as he took a deep breath of the crisp night air, he felt something he hadn't in a long time. Peace. The fallout of the events at the gala had been swift and brutal. Riya's public humiliation had spread like wildfire through their social circles, and Vikram's professional life was in shambles. Aditya had watched from a distance as the two people who had betrayed him faced the consequences of their actions. It was satisfying, but it wasn't the closure he had hoped for. Riya, desperate to salvage what was left of her life, had tried to reach out to Aditya multiple times. She sent him messages, called him incessantly, and even showed up at his apartment, unannounced. Each time, Aditya refused to engage. He wasn't interested in hearing her excuses or apologies. Her actions had spoken louder than any words ever could. One evening, however, she managed to catch him as he was leaving for a meeting with Aryan. "Aditya, please," she pleaded, her voice trembling. "I made a mistake. I've lost everything. Can't we at least talk?" Aditya looked at her, his expression unreadable. "Riya," he said, his voice calm but firm. "This isn't about you anymore. I spent years trying to make you happy, but you chose to betray me. I've moved on, and I suggest you do the same." Her face crumpled, and for a moment, Aditya felt a pang of sympathy. But he reminded himself that this was the same woman who had laughed behind his back with Vikram, who had dismissed his love and loyalty as insignificant. He walked away, leaving her standing alone in the hallway. The Phoenix Club had been instrumental in helping Aditya regain his footing, but it was his own determination that had carried him forward. With Aryan's guidance, he had started exploring new opportunities. He left his job at the IT firm, unable to bear working in the same environment that Vikram had tainted. Instead, he began consulting for startups, using his expertise to help budding entrepreneurs navigate the challenges of the tech industry. Mira had been a constant presence in his life during this time. Their bond had grown deeper, and Aditya found himself looking forward to their conversations. She was kind, understanding, and unwaveringly supportive. One evening, as they shared a quiet dinner at her bakery, Mira asked him a question that caught him off guard. "Do you think you'll ever be able to trust someone again?" she asked, her voice soft. Aditya thought for a moment before replying. "I think trust isn't something you can force. It has to be earned, slowly, over time. But yes, I believe it's possible. You've shown me that there are still good people in the world." Mira smiled, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "And you've shown me that it's possible to heal, no matter how deep the wounds." As Aditya's life began to stabilize, he decided to give back to the Phoenix Club. He started mentoring new members, sharing his story, and offering guidance to those who were just beginning their own journeys of healing. It was a way for him to channel his pain into something meaningful, to turn his experiences into a source of strength for others. Aryan, impressed by Aditya's growth, offered him a more active role in the club. "You've come a long way," Aryan said during one of their meetings. I think you have the potential to help even more people. Would you consider becoming a core member of the Phoenix Club? Aditya hesitated, surprised by the offer. But as he thought about it, he realized that the club had given him a sense of purpose he hadn't felt in years. "I'd be honored," he said, shaking Aryan's hand. One day, while going through some old files, Aditya stumbled upon an email thread between Riya and Vikram that he hadn't seen before. It revealed that their affair had started much earlier than he had initially thought, long before the signs of their betrayal became obvious. The realization stung, but it also brought him closure. He now understood that their actions had nothing to do with him and everything to do with their own flaws and insecurities. Aditya decided not to dwell on it. He had come too far to let the past drag him down again. Instead, he focused on the
future, a future where he was no longer defined by betrayal, but by resilience and growth.
Months turned into a year, and Aditya's life looked completely different. His consulting business was thriving, the Phoenix Club had become an integral part of his life, and his relationship with Mira had blossomed into something beautiful. They took things slow, both wary of rushing into anything, but there was an undeniable connection between them. One evening, as they walked along the beach, Mira turned to him and said, "I'm proud of you, Aditya. You've come so far." He smiled, squeezing her hand. "I couldn't have done it without you. Thank you for believing in me." As they watched the sun set over the horizon, Aditya felt a sense of contentment he hadn't thought possible. The scars of the past would always be there, but they no longer defined him. He had reclaimed his life, his dignity, and his happiness. And for the first time in a long time, he was excited about what the future held. Aditya stood on the balcony of his new apartment, watching the city lights twinkle like distant stars. The pain of betrayal no longer consumed him. It had shaped him into a stronger, wiser man. The Phoenix Club had become his second family, a beacon of hope in his darkest times. Riya's chapter in his life was closed, her betrayal a painful lesson he would never forget. As he sipped his coffee, a soft knock on the door broke his thoughts. Mira stood there, smiling warmly. For the first time in a long time, Aditya felt the stirrings of something he thought he had lost, hope for a brighter tomorrow.